The cold wind arrives early in the early stillness before dawn. The only sound was the faint creaking of wooden beams in the Zook family's cabin. A thin veil of frost clung to the window panes, shimmering faintly as the first gray hints of morning peered beyond the hills. Winter had not yet come, but it had sent a warning. And in the wilderness of 17th century Pennsylvania, even a warning could feel like a death sentence. 16-year-old Anna Zook stirred under her woolen quilt, blinking. Into the half-darkness, the cold had already slipped into the house overnight. She could see her breath as a soft mist when she exhaled, and she curled deeper beneath the covers, listening. Silence, too much of it. Even the hens had stopped clucking. Something was wrong. She felt it. Beside her, Samuel, only 12 and frail from last year's fever, still slept, curled like a kitten. His thin shoulders rose and fell gently with each breath. Anna carefully pulled the quilt higher over him before swinging her legs over the side of the bed. The wooden floor bit at her feet like ice. She gasped softly, wrapped a rough shawl around her shoulders and tiptoed to the hearth. The fire had gone out. She knelt, working the flint with shaking fingers. Strike, miss, strike. Finally, a faint flame flickered in the ashes. She fed it straw, then twigs, whispering encouragement. As if it were a stubborn animal, the fire grew, casting dancing shadows on the log walls and warming her numb hands. Behind her, a quiet voice broke the silence. "Thou always rise before the sun." Anna turned to see her mother, Martha Zook, sitting on the edge of the cot, her gray-streaked hair braided tightly. Her voice was tired but kind. "The fire died," Anna said softly. "It often does," Martha replied, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. "But thou always wake in time to light it again." The compliment warmed Anna more than the fire. Praise was rare in the Zook household, not from cruelty, but from necessity. Words were sacred. Life was labor. Emotions were quiet. But Martha always had a way of saying the right things, even in whispers. That morning's porridge was thinner than usual. The flour sack was nearly empty, and the hens had stopped laying eggs. Still, Anna stirred the pot with patience, adding herbs and a pinch of salt as if it were a royal meal. She spooned the warm mix into 3 wooden bowls and placed them on the table just as Jacob Zook returned from the barn. His face said everything. He set down his wide-brimmed hat without a word, sat at the table and stared into his bowl, clung to his boots. His gloves were soaked. The silence in the room grew thick. Martha spoke first. "Jacob." He didn't look up. "Frosts come early. The fields are ruined." Anna's heart dropped. "All of it." He nodded. "Corn's black, beans cracked, even the squashes turned." A long silence followed. Martha sat still. Anna bit her lip. Samuel, who had just awakened and joined them at the table, looked between their faces, unsure whether he was allowed to ask what they all feared. "Will we have enough to survive the winter?" Jacob finally said. "We'll have to ration. No trades, no favors. We'll make do." Martha bowed her head in silent agreement. Anna said nothing, but her thoughts were loud. They had barely survived last winter. Samuel had nearly died. How would they last this one, with no food stores and barely any flour? After the meal, the day unfolded slowly, like a cold blanket pulled too tightly. Anna spent hours hauling wood from the grove, her arms aching with every trip. The snow hadn't fallen yet, but the air was full of it, crisp, biting, and dry. Each breath felt like swallowing ice. Jacob and Samuel worked to check the remaining crops, salvaging anything that wasn't spoiled. The younger boy stumbled often, but kept going, dragging a half-filled basket of turnips behind him. That evening, after chores were done and the house darkened except for the fire, Anna returned to her mother's side. Martha sat near the hearth, sewing a torn sleeve on Samuel's coat. "Do you remember the summer before last?" Anna asked quietly, sitting beside her. Martha looked up. "When the sun stayed for weeks." Anna nodded. "And we had peaches. So many, we dried them on the roof." Her mother smiled faintly. "Yes, thy father called it the peach year. Said God was generous. I miss it. We all do." The fire popped softly between them. For a while, neither spoke. Martha whispered, "Hard years come like storms. They test the walls of thy soul." Anna tilted her head. "And if the walls break, then build stronger ones," Martha said. "From love, from memory, from whatever is left." The next morning, Anna awoke to a scream. Samuel. She bolted upright and rushed out the front door. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a drum. Outside, near the barn, Samuel knelt in the snow, hands outstretched. Their goat Ivy lay still, in the frost, her breath no longer visible, her legs stiff. She had died in the night. She was fine yesterday. Samuel cried. Jacob walked over slowly, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He knelt, checked the animal, and placed a hand gently on his son's shoulder. "She was old," he said. "The cold was too much. We could have brought her in." Samuel shouted. Anna stood frozen. She couldn't speak. Samuel's tears stung worse than the wind. That goat had been his best friend through the winters. They buried Ivy behind the barn, in the soil that once grew potatoes. The ground was hard, and the work was slow. But Jacob let Samuel stay beside her the whole time, let him say a prayer, even let him cry. That night, Anna heard her father pray louder than usual. He prayed not just for food or strength but for peace, and for forgiveness. It was the first time she heard his voice crack. Days passed. The cabin grew colder. One night, the water in the bucket froze solid, even beside the hearth. Martha's hands trembled more often. Jacob's beard thickened, and his eyes grew hollow. Anna worked harder, pushing past the aches in her legs, the cuts on her palms. She scavenged bark, mushrooms, and wild onion. She melted snow for water. She kept the fire alive. Then one evening Martha collapsed. It happened suddenly. She had been grinding wheat with a stone bowl when she stumbled, fell hard and didn't move. Jacob rushed to her. Anna screamed. Samuel froze, wide-eyed. "She's burning," Jacob said, feeling her forehead. "Fever again." They laid her down by the fire. Her skin was pale, and sweat soaked her hair. "We need help," Anna whispered. "There is no one," Jacob replied. "There's Elias," Anna said, almost without thinking. Jacob's jaw clenched. "He is not one of us. He saved her before." Anna cried. "You said nothing then?" Jacob stared at the fire. "We are not beggars." "No," Anna said, her voice steady now. "We are a family and she's dying." Without waiting, she wrapped herself in a thick coat, took the lantern, and stepped out into the snow. She didn't look back. The snow was deeper now, lying heavy like unspoken truths. It covered everything: the barn, the fields, even the path where Anna had walked for help that day. Time had slowed to a crawl since Martha's collapse. The cold outside had seeped into their lives, but so had something more subtle. A strange kind of quiet that wasn't the peace of prayer or the hush of snowfall. It was the silence of exhaustion, of waiting. Martha Zook was still breathing, but her fever returned the night after Anna brought Elias. Her skin radiated heat even as her hands turned cool. She murmured things that didn't make sense. Mame's verses, sometimes just wind-like sighs. Anna barely left her mother's side now. She fed her sips of broth, wiped her brow with damp cloths, and prayed when her voice didn't tremble too much. Jacob Zook, a man made of rules and winter steel, had changed. He never spoke Elias's name, but he hadn't forbidden Anna from caring for her mother with the outsider's herbs. He didn't question the strange powder Elias had left behind, or the bark tincture Anna brewed in secret. Perhaps he knew, perhaps he was just too tired to fight it. What Anna noticed most, however, was how he watched Martha. In the past he would pass his wife with a nod, a brief glance, a brush of fingertips. But now he lingered near the hearth, his eyes following her face for minutes at a time. Once Anna found him staring into the fire with tears sitting quietly on his cheeks. He didn't wipe them. He just let them fall, like ashes. Samuel had taken to sleeping beside the hearth every night. He said it was warmer, but Anna knew it was more than that. He was afraid of waking up to find his mother gone. One afternoon, as Anna refilled the firewood bin, she found something strange: an old shawl tucked into the very back of the chest where they kept dried herbs and linens. It wasn't Amish in style. The weave was thinner, looser. There were small, colorful threads that didn't belong to any Zook pattern. And sewn into the inner hem was a name. Elanna frowned. There were no E names in their family, none that she knew of. She brought it to her mother's bedside. Martha stirred slightly at the touch of the fabric against her skin. Her cracked lips parted. "Elizabeth." Anna's breath caught. "Mama, who is Elizabeth?" But Martha was slipping again, her voice fading back into fevered dreams. That night, while the wind shook the trees like rattling bones, Anna sat near the fire with Samuel curled at her feet. She gently pulled the shawl over her lap, tracing the stitching, wondering what secrets it held. Then she remembered the letter, the one she had read weeks ago. A name, Elizabeth, and a sentence that had never left her. "The child has his eyes." Could it be true? Was there a part of her family no one spoke of? A sin Jacob buried, a sister exiled, a half-brother. The thought haunted her. Outside, the cold pressed against the walls like a visitor waiting to be let in. The fire popped and crackled, but Anna felt no warmth, only questions. The next morning, Martha's fever broke. It was sudden, like the clouds pulling back from a storm. Her breathing steadied, her eyes open, not wide but clear. She squeezed Anna's hand. "You're here," she whispered. Anna nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "I never left." Martha turned her head weakly. "Your hands, like your grandfather's. I used to hold his when I was small. He taught me to stitch." "I know," Anna whispered. "You told me once when I was little." Her mother gave a tired smile. "Then you remembered, for the first time in weeks." Anna smiled back. Jacob knelt beside the bed a few minutes later. He didn't say anything. He simply placed his hand over Martha's and held it there. They stayed like that a long time. Days passed. Martha grew stronger. Her voice returned, soft but steady. She even sat up one morning and asked for tea. Samuel cheered so loudly he scared the chickens outside. But the world didn't get easier. The frost remained. The snow thickened. The barn sagged under its own weight, and the animals grew thin. Their pantry was nearly empty, and firewood had to be rationed. One night, the wind blew so hard it tore the back fence clean off, and Jacob spent hours in the freezing dark trying to mend it with rope and prayer. Despite it all, something had changed in the house. The silence no longer felt like dread, it was a kind of shared courage. Anna could feel it. One evening, after supper of boiled roots and a stale crust of bread, Anna approached her father near the barn. He was feeding the goat the last scoop of oats. "Papa," she said, "did you know Mama had a sister?" Jacob froze. He didn't turn around. "I found the shawl," Anna said, "and the letter. Elizabeth, she left." Jacob stood still, then said, without turning, "We do not speak of those who leave." "Why not?" Anna asked quietly. "Because they broke the circle." Anna swallowed hard. "But what if they were pushed?" He finally turned, eyes full of tired fury. "Enough." Anna didn't say another word. She walked away, her heart pounding. Later that night, as the fire burned low, she sat beside her mother again. Martha was drowsy but clear-minded. "Me about her," Anna said. Martha stared at the flames. Then, with a deep sigh, she spoke. "Elizabeth was my younger sister." She laughed with her whole face. "Always barefoot, always brave. She met a man one spring, a traveler, not Amish. He read books, wrote poetry. She loved him." Anna listened closely. She was warned, Martha continued, by the bishop, by father, even by me. "But love is not something you can shush like a child." She left, and when she wrote to me later, she had a son. "Did you ever see them again?" Martha shook her head. "Just once. In the hills 2 winters later." She was thin, poor, but her eyes, they were the same. Anna swallowed. "The letter said." "The child had his eyes." Martha smiled faintly. "He did. And his name I never asked." Anna sat in silence. A thought burned in her mind like fire. "Elias?" she asked. Martha looked startled, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps." Anna sat back dizzy. Could Elias, the quiet, strong man who had helped them, be her cousin? Was that why he returned to their land? Did he know? That night she sat up long after everyone slept, staring at the embers. She thought of Elias's eyes, the way he looked at the trees, like he belonged to the land and yet stood apart from it. There were so many questions, so many hidden stories. But Anna didn't feel afraid. For the first time in her life she wanted to know everything. It began with a sound, a low groaning creak that echoed across the frozen fields like the moan of something ancient and in pain. Anna was the first to hear it. She had just returned from the stream, dragging a pail of half-frozen water back toward the house when the noise stopped her cold in her tracks. She turned toward the barn. The old wooden structure stood hunched against the snowfall, its roof white with weight and shadow. It had always leaned slightly. Years of wind and rot had done that, but now it sagged dangerously, like a weary traveler ready to collapse. The central beam, Jacob had said weeks ago, was cracked but holding, but Anna knew it wasn't holding anymore. She dropped the bucket and ran, her boots crunching through snow, her breath forming clouds in the air. "Samuel," she screamed, "are you in the barn?" The door swung open and her little brother's face peeked out. "Just feeding the chickens," he called. "Why get out?" Anna shrieked. Now, a sharp crack split the air, then another, and then the roof groaned and began to fall. Anna didn't think. She dashed through the snow, past the broken gate, and into the barn just as a massive timber snapped overhead. A hail of straw, splinters, and dust exploded around her. Her ears rang. She felt the world tilt, but she saw Samuel small, terrified, frozen in place with a basket of eggs in his hands. She leaped toward him. They hit the floor together, and a great beam crashed behind them, shattering the feed table. Anna rolled, shielding Samuel with her body as more wood fell like judgment from the sky. The roof groaned again, louder now, and with a final shudder, a full section collapsed, then silence. Outside, Jacob had dropped his axe and was sprinting toward the barn, boots slipping on the ice. He tore the broken door aside just as Anna emerged, coughing and covered in dust, one arm wrapped around her brother's shoulders. "Dear God," Jacob breathed. "I'm all right," Anna wheezed. "He's okay too." Samuel nodded, eyes wide and tearful. "She saved me," Jacob said. "Nothing." He pulled them both into his arms and held them tightly. It was the first time in Anna's life she had felt his arms like that, warm, desperate, real. He whispered something then, just one word. Enough. The barn couldn't be saved. That night, as the family sat silently around the fire, Jacob finally spoke. "It's time," he said. "We'll ask the others. The community, even if we trade work or tools. We cannot do this alone anymore." Anna looked at her father with quiet disbelief. He was a proud man, an isolated one, but tonight, he looked older, smaller, as if nearly losing both his children in one breath had peeled away the last of his pride. Martha nodded from her seat beside the hearth. "We must live, even if it means breaking silence." That week, Jacob visited the Millers and the Stoltzfus family. He took Samuel with him, and though they came back with little food, they returned with something else. Plans. The neighbors would come together. They'd raise a new barn come spring. They'd help fix the goat fence. In return, Jacob would offer his time, tools, and hard-earned respect. But it was more than that. For the first time in years, the Zooks became part of the village again. Anna, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about Elias. She hadn't seen him since the night of the fever. But when she passed the edge of the woods, she often saw faint smoke rising beyond the trees. He was still nearby, still watching maybe. One morning, while walking with a basket of dry bread and cloth scraps to Ruth's house, she stopped by the tall sycamore near the ridge, their unofficial meeting place. She placed a small bundle at the base of the tree. Inside, a note: "The barn fell. We are alive. Thank you." She left it there and walked away. The next morning the bundle was gone. And in its place, a loaf of fresh bread, wrapped in warm linen. The storm came suddenly, without warning, without mercy. The day had started quietly, with the promise of spring hidden beneath the snowmelt. There were birds again. A single robin had been spotted near the stream, and for the first time in months, the chickens clucked with energy instead of fear. Anna had risen early to chop wood. Her fingers were raw, her muscles tired, but there was hope in her breath now. Even the wind felt different, not bitter, but restless, like it carried secrets on its back. That was when she saw him, a man walking slowly along the tree line barefoot. She blinked. He came from the east, from the forest no one traveled. His coat was long and patched, barely clinging to his frame. His hat was missing, and his hair was tangled with leaves. But most of all it was his feet, purple from the cold, bare, bleeding. Anna dropped her axe. "Papa," she called, turning toward the cabin. "There's someone." By the time Jacob reached her side, the man had collapsed. They carried him inside and laid him near the fire. His skin was gray, lips cracked. He didn't speak, just breathed in shallow, painful gulps. "He'll lose his feet," Jacob said grimly. "Not if we act quickly," Martha replied. She boiled water. Anna brought clean cloth. Samuel sat nearby, staring at the stranger's face with a mixture of awe and fear. "Who walks barefoot in snow?" he whispered. "Someone running from something," Anna said quietly. The man stirred. His eyes fluttered open. Blue, deep, pale blue, like winter skies right before a storm. He tried to sit, but his body gave out. "Hush," Martha said gently, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. "Rest now." He looked at her, then at Anna, then, slowly, whispered a name: "Elias." Anna's heart stopped. "You know Elias?" she asked. The man nodded. "Are you family?" A long pause. Then, "No, but I owe him my life." The man's name was Tobias. He had no last name, or at least not one he would speak. He had traveled on foot from the south, escaping something he refused to name. His eyes told stories he wouldn't say aloud. Loss of war, of running. He had met Elias in a logging camp 3 winters ago. Said Elias had saved him from a group of men who hunted outsiders. Anna didn't press for details. Neither did her mother. In Amish life, silence often said more than words. For days, Tobias remained in their home. He healed slowly, spoke little, but his presence shifted something in the cabin. Jacob was cautious, suspicious, but even he couldn't deny the man's quiet humility. Tobias offered to chop wood on his 3rd day. On the 4th he fixed the squeaky front door without being asked. On the 5th, he mended Samuel's broken sled and taught him how to oil the runners with beeswax. Anna watched him closely. He moved like a man used to hiding, eyes always scanning the edges, feet light on the floorboards. But when he laughed, it was rare. It came from somewhere deep, like he'd forgotten how, and just remembered again. One night as the family sat around the fire, Martha asked, "Do you have people?" Tobias stared into the flames. "I did," he said. "Not anymore." "Where did you lose them?" Jacob asked. "In the name of God," Tobias said quietly. The room fell silent. Martha nodded solemnly. She understood. So did Anna. They had seen what men could do in God's name. A week later, Ruth visited. She arrived with a bundle of eggs and half a wheel of cheese. Her red cheeks glowed in the cold air, and she hugged Anna tightly by the gate. "We heard about the barn," she said. "Papa says he'll help in spring." Anna smiled. "Tell him we'll trade for nails." Inside, Ruth met Tobias. Her smile faltered for just a second. She was used to strangers being treated with caution, especially in the village. But she offered him a nod and a polite, "Peace be with you." Tobias nodded back. "And with your soul." After Ruth left, Jacob pulled Anna aside. "You will not walk with him alone," he said firmly. "Papa," I said. "No. He's not dangerous. He is unknown," Jacob said. But Elias was unknown too. Jacob's jaw clenched. That was different. Anna knew better than to argue further. But her heart simmered. Her father had softened. Yes, but his fear of outsiders still held him prisoner. That night, she sat by Tobias as he rubbed ointment into his healing feet. "Do you know where Elias is?" she asked. Tobias looked up. "He left us a year ago. That said he had a family to find. A promise to keep." "What kind of promise?" He shook his head. "He never said." Anna leaned forward. "Do you think he's related to us?" Tobias studied her. His voice lowered. "Elias carries sorrow in his blood, but he also carries hope. If you're connected to him, then you're part of both." Snow was still piled against the cabin walls when word came from the village. A knock sounded on the Zook's wooden door just after sunrise, sharp, deliberate, the kind that doesn't wait for invitation. Jacob opened it to find 3 men from the church standing in the frost, their horses steaming behind them. The eldest, tall and stern, wore a dark coat and a wide hat that cast his face in shadow. He was Bishop Reuben Yost. Anna watched from the stairs, her breath caught in her throat. "Jacob Zook," Reuben said, his voice grave. You and your family are summoned to the meeting house this afternoon. For what reason? Jacob asked, not moving. You have taken in a stranger, the bishop said, one who has not been cleansed in the ordinal, one who has not been declared before the elders. You have allowed him to live beneath your roof, to work your land, to eat your bread. Jacob was silent. This is a violation, Reuben continued, and it must be addressed. We did what we had to, Jacob said finally. He would have died, perhaps, the bishop replied. But it is not for you to decide. With that, they turned and rode off, leaving deep hoofprints in the snow. The meeting house was a squat building near the edge of the village, with cold white walls and a slate roof that always dripped. That day the benches were full. Word had spread the Zooks entered through the back door. Anna held Samuel's hand. Martha walked slowly, her frame still recovering. Jacob led them without a word. Tobias was not allowed to come. Reuben stood at the front, a heavy book in his hands. His beard was long and silver, his eyes sharp as glass. He looked over the gathered community, then spoke. God gives us laws. We are not above them. When we stray, we break not only the rules but the peace. He turned to Jacob. You welcomed a man without the blessing of the elders, a man with no lineage among us, a man who speaks of the world and carries its dust upon his shoes. He had no shoes, Samuel whispered. Several people turned. Jacob placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I took him in, Jacob said clearly. He was dying, we had fire. That was all. And you kept him even after the danger passed. He helped us rebuild. He harmed no one. That is not the point, Reuben said. We are not judged by the world's mercy. We are judged by obedience. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Anna couldn't stay quiet. If the ordnang says to let a man freeze to death, is it God's will or a man's gasps? Reuben stared at her. Child, this is not your place. She's right, Martha said softly. All heads turned. The room shifted. Martha rose to her feet. Her voice was weak but steady. I would be dead if not for Elias, a man you call an outsider, and Tobias. He brought us water. He brought my son food. He mended our roof. He did more than some who sit here today. That stung. Reuben's face twitched. This is not about one act of kindness, he said. It is about order. The ordnung binds us. Anna looked around. Many nodded. Others lowered their eyes. Then perhaps, Jacob said, stepping forward. We need to ask if the ordnung has grown too tight, if it strangles more than it protects. Silence. Long, tense silence. Reuben opened the book. You will not be shunned, but you are to remove the outsider from your home within 2 days. If not, you forfeit your place among us, your land, your trade, and your standing. He closed the book with a thud. Meeting adjourned. They returned home in silence. Tobias sat near the fire, polishing a borrowed pair of boots. When he saw their faces, he stood. I heard, he said quietly. I won't send you away, Jacob said. But they will, Tobias replied, and I won't let you suffer for it. Anna stepped forward. You don't have to go. He looked at her, eyes soft. I always have to go. That's how I stay free. Martha rose, her hands trembling. You have a place here, Tobias smiled. I did for a time, and I'll carry it with me. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She stepped outside, wrapped in her shawl, and found Tobias standing near the old sycamore. Where will you go? She asked. West, he said. Maybe to the river towns. Maybe farther. I hear they don't ask as many questions there. She looked down. You don't have to be alone. I'm not, he said. I have every soul that ever showed me kindness, including yours. He turned to leave but stopped. Tell Elias, he said. If he returns, he was right about you, about your family. Then he vanished into the trees. Anna, standing in the snow, felt both loss and pride, because sometimes being good meant being wrong by the world's measure, not by the heart's. There are many ways to speak when your voice is not allowed to rise. Some people sing, others pray. Anna Zook wrote letters. She began the first one 2 days after Tobias left. The cabin felt different now, emptier somehow. Though no furniture had moved, the fire crackled the same way, and the snow still howled against the windows, but the air was quieter. Lonelier. Anna sat at the edge of her bed, a scrap of parchment in her lap, her fingers trembling slightly. She dipped the quill into the ink bottle she'd hidden under the floorboard weeks ago and wrote the words, Dear Elias, the barn has fallen, but we did not. I think of you when the wind sounds like someone walking toward us. She folded the letter and placed it inside the hollow stump near the sycamore tree, the same one where Tobias's bread had appeared. Whether Elias would ever read it, she didn't know, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had finally said something out loud, even if only to the trees. The next morning, the letter was gone. She kept writing after that, sometimes about her mother's slow recovery, other times about Samuel's new habit of singing to the chickens, or how the old goat had stopped chewing her tether and started following Martha around like a shadow. She told Elias about the bishop's decree, about Tobias, about the look in her father's eyes that day, both broken and burning. And she wrote things she had never said out loud, not even in prayer. I don't know who I am outside of chores and duty, but I feel something new inside me now. It's not rebellion, it's not anger, it's light, small but steady, like a coal in my chest. Weeks passed, then months. Spring tried its best to come, but the thaw was slow and stubborn. The trees remained bare too long. The soil was muddy and cold. Still, the barn began to rise again. First came the posts, set deep into the ground by Jacob and 3 neighboring farmers. Then the beams, the nails, the roof. The entire village pitched in, even those who had once turned away. Perhaps the winter had broken more than trees and fences. Perhaps it had softened the edges of people too. Anna's letters continued. She never signed her name, but she always folded each one in the same careful pattern, 3 creases. Then a leaf tucked inside, pressed flat from the river path she liked to walk. She left them in the stump every Friday, and every Saturday they were gone. Sometimes she found things in return: a coin carved with a tree symbol, a small wooden rabbit, a feather dyed red. Once, a page from a book with a note scribbled at the bottom: "The world is wider than the walls we're born behind." Anna read that line again and again. She began to dream of other places. She imagined wide rivers, markets filled with strangers speaking in songs, boats that danced on water, cities with bells ringing like laughter. And always she imagined a face in the crowd with Ilias's quiet eyes. One evening, as she prepared the fire, Martha surprised her with a question. "You walk more often these days, alone?" Anna froze. "I gather herbs," she said softly. "Your apron gathers paper, not plants," Martha said gently. Anna looked up, startled. Her mother smiled faintly. "I know more than I speak." A silence fell between them. Then Anna asked, "Did you ever want to leave?" Martha sat slowly beside the fire. Her hands were folded, still trembling slightly from the illness that had nearly taken her. "When I was your age," she said, "I used to climb the ridge behind the river, just to see how far the trees went. I told myself if I ever saw the end of them, I'd walk there and not stop." "And did you?" Martha's eyes twinkled. "I never saw the end. Just more trees. But I saw birds flying over the trees, and that was enough." Anna leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I don't want to fly away. I just want to know what flying feels like." Martha kissed her forehead. "Then write, speak, dream, even if only in letters." That night, Anna left a different kind of letter. It wasn't addressed to Elias. It was addressed to herself. "I want to be a fire no one can put out. Not one that burns others, just one that never goes cold inside." She left it in the stump anyway. In the morning it was gone too. Spring came in fits and starts. Some days, the fields turned green in sudden bursts, like the earth had held its breath all winter and was finally exhaling. Other days, frost still crept back at night, biting tender shoots and shattering fragile hope. But it was change, and that, in itself, was a kind of salvation. The new barn stood tall, now half finished but proud. The community had come together to raise it. Not everyone spoke kindly while they worked, but they showed up. That was enough. Samuel had taken it upon himself to name every chicken a biblical name: Esther, Ruth, Jonah, and even Chicken the Baptist. It made Martha laugh until she cried. But peace, like spring, never lasted long in the Zook's world. The trouble began with an apple. Samuel had gone to the village to trade eggs. It was a chore Anna usually handled, but she was nursing Martha through a late spring fever. So Jacob sent Samuel instead, proud of his son's sense of math and fairness. He wore a clean shirt, his best boots, and carried a wicker basket with 6 brown eggs inside, carefully packed in hay. He returned an hour later, pale and shaking. "I didn't trade the eggs," he whispered to Jacob. "Why not? They accused me of stealing." Jacob stiffened. "Who?" Samuel's voice cracked. "Bishop Reuben's grandson, and the storekeeper's boy. They said they saw me take an apple from the barrel." "Did you?" Jacob asked, voice calm but heavy. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "No, Papa. I just looked at it, I swear." Anna moved to her brother's side. "He's telling the truth." But it was already out of their hands. The next day, a letter came sealed with wax. The Zooks were summoned again. The meeting house smelled of dust and damp wood. Sunlight filtered through the high windows in dull strips, and everyone sat straighter than usual. The benches creaked under the weight of judgment. Samuel stood in front of the congregation, his hands clenched at his sides. His lips trembled. Jacob stood beside him. Anna and Martha sat behind them, silent, as Reuben addressed the room. "A boy has broken trust," the bishop said. "He has been seen reaching into the market barrel. He did not ask, he did not pay. He then returned home and said nothing." "I didn't take it," Samuel said softly. "You touched it," said Reuben's grandson, stepping forward. "I looked at it," Samuel replied, louder this time. "You handled it." "The storekeeper's boy added. "That is as good as theft." Anna stood suddenly. "That's not true." Reuben held up his hand. "You were not permitted to speak." "But it's false," she said. "He's 12. He didn't take a single bite." "You're shaming a child because he's poor." Gasps spread across the benches. Reuben's eyes narrowed. "Poverty does not excuse dishonor." Jacob raised his hand. "My son says he did not take it." "That is enough for me." "It is not enough for us," Reuben replied coldly. Martha slowly rose to her feet, holding her walking stick. "You called us here because a hungry child touched an apple," she said, her voice shaking. You banished a stranger who saved my life. You scold my daughter for questioning silence. And now you want to punish my son for curiosity." "He did not confess," Reuben said, "because he did not sin," Martha replied. Reuben hesitated. It was then that Ruth stood. "I was there," she said. All eyes turned. "I saw him," Ruth continued. "He only looked. The apple had a worm in it. He turned it over, saw the hole, and set it back. I saw it myself. He never put it in his basket." The air in the room changed. Reuben's mouth twitched. Silence stretched. Then Jacob spoke. "My son will not stand here as if you were a criminal." He took Samuel's hand and turned to go. "Jacob Zook," Reuben said sharply. "If you walk out now," Jacob looked over his shoulder. "You'll do what? Shoot us again?" He walked out. Anna followed, so did Martha. And after a long still moment, Ruth's family stood 2, then 2 more, and 3 more, until the benches were nearly empty. Reuben stood alone at the front, clutching his book. Back at home, Samuel wept in his sister's arms. "I didn't lie," he said through sobs. "I know." Anna whispered, "You stood like a man." Martha made him tea with honey and let him skip chores for the day. Jacob said nothing, but that night, he carved Samuel's name into the new barn beam, just beside his own. Anna watched from the shadows, her heart full. In one trial, Samuel had grown, not just in age but in spirit, and so had they all. Autumn did not come. Really. The leaves turned gold and crimson. Yes, but they barely had time to fall before the wind stripped them bare. The ground froze in mid-October, and by All Saints' Day, snow covered the Zook farm in thick white sheets, as though the land itself had closed its eyes and refused to wake again. The community had changed since Samuel's trial. Some had stayed close, others had drawn away, perhaps uncomfortable with Jacob's defiance, or afraid of Bishop Reuben's quiet wrath. There were whispers, now always whispers, about Anna's boldness, about Martha's outbursts, about the stranger who once lived under their roof, but none of the whispers brought firewood. None brought food, and as the cold deepened, those were what the Zooks needed most. They were banished not by decree, but by neglect. That was how the ordning worked when the bishop didn't want blood on his hands. The Zooks were not formally shunned, but no one visited. No one brought supplies. No one answered when Jacob knocked on doors for trade. The woods became their lifeline. Jacob hunted squirrels, rabbits, once even a deer, though the shot frightened Samuel so badly he cried for half an hour. Anna trapped birds and gathered bark. For T.I. Martha, thin as thread, sewed blankets from scraps. Her fingers shook, her eyesight dimmed, but her hands kept moving. And yet it was not just the hunger that wore them down, it was the silence. Not the quiet of peaceful prayer or snowy fields, but the oppressive stillness of being forgotten, of being erased by the very people who once shared bread and blessings. There were no songs that winter, no letters from Elias. The hollow stump remained empty, week after week. Anna still left, a message now and then, more from habit than hope. She wondered if Elias had moved on, if he had ever read them at all. One night the wind howled so loud that the shutters shook loose and slammed against the cabin wall. Jacob nailed them down with his bare hands, blood freezing on the boards. When he came back inside, Martha wrapped his hands in hot cloth and prayed over them, weeping silently. Anna sat in the corner, staring at the fire. She had not cried in weeks, not even when the last goat died. But that night she finally did. Not loud, not for long. Just a single tear that fell onto the back of her hand and sizzled in the heat. They burned the furniture next. First, the old bench, then the broken door from the summer kitchen, then the chest where Anna had kept her childhood doll, long since outgrown and moth-bitten. Each night, the house grew colder, but the fire stayed lit. One evening, Martha collapsed again, this time not from fever but from hunger. Her legs gave way near the hearth, and Anna caught her just before her head struck the stones. "She hasn't eaten in 2 days." Samuel cried. "She gave her portion to you," Jacob said quietly. They laid her down and covered her with every blanket they had, but her breathing was thin. Her lips cracked. That night, Anna did something she had not done since she was a child. She ran outside, into the storm, and screamed. She screamed into the snow, into the dark, into the sky. "Please, anyone, please." Her voice vanished into the wind, and then she fell. Knees in the snow, hands bleeding from the cold. She wept until she heard something behind her, a footstep. The snow had not melted, but something else had. Pride. Fear. Walls that once stood so tall in the village began to show cracks, not the kind winter made, but the kind grief carves into men when they've seen too much and helped too little. It started with a knock. Ruth stood at the Zook family's door just past dawn, cheeks pink with frost, her arms full of cloth, apples and firewood. Her father's old wool coat was too large on her, but she didn't seem to care. She looked different, not just older, but resolute. "I've come to help," she said simply. Anna stared at her best friend, heart thudding. "They'll see. You let them." "But your father already yelled, already slammed the door." "I came anyway." Inside, Ruth dropped the bundle by the hearth and looked around. The cabin was thin and cold, but something fierce still burned in it, something defiant, like the eyes of a family that had been bruised but not broken. Martha tried to sit up but winced. I brought bomb to Ruth said, kneeling beside her. Mama made it from pine resin. She doesn't know I took it. Martha gave a soft smile. Then God bless her, even in her silence. Jacob returned from the woods carrying a bundle of sticks and stared at Ruth for a long time before nodding. Anna and Ruth sat near the fire that night, shoulders touching, hands open between them like sisters sharing warmth. I think I'll leave, Ruth said after a long silence. Anna looked at her. What do you mean, come spring, when the roads thaw, when the wagons start moving again? Anna blinked. You're serious? Ruth nodded. I'm not like you, Anna. You're a tree, deep roots. I'm wind. I need to go. Anna swallowed, her heart squeezed. You'll go alone. I won't be the only one. Anna knew that was true. Other young girls had vanished in the night, their names no longer spoken during Sunday meetings. They became rumors. Echoes. Ruth reached into her pocket and pulled out something folded, a map. Hand drawn, faded. Elias gave me this, she said. Said if I ever got tired of watching the world through wooden slats, I could use it. Anna unfolded it carefully. A trail, rivers, a town circled in ink. Willow Bend. You've kept this. Every day. They sat in silence again. Only the fire spoke. Then Ruth asked, would you come with me? Anna froze. The question had lived in her own heart for months, but hearing it aloud made it real and terrifying. I don't know, she whispered. You're not made for cages. Either, Anna. I'm not made for running. You're made for more, though. Anna couldn't answer. Ruth kissed her cheek before bed. You don't have to decide now, but the wagon leaves in 2 moons. From the pine road, the next days were quiet. Ruth stayed and helped mend what she could. Samuel followed her like a puppy. Even Jacob softened, allowing her to join in prayer and meals. But time does not wait for peace to settle. It keeps marching. And soon, it was the day. Ruth packed at dawn, a satchel, a book, a map, dried fruit, and a feather from the stump left behind by someone unknown. I guess this is my sign, she said with a grin. Anna didn't sleep the night before. She watched Ruth's satchel resting near the hearth like a promise she was too scared to make. Now, she followed her friend to the edge of the woods. Are you sure? She asked one last time. Ruth nodded. More sure than I've ever been. They hugged. Tight. Long. With a kind of love no bishop could understand. When you write, Anna whispered, don't lie. Tell me everything. Ruth smiled. Even the hard parts. Especially those. Then she turned and walked away. Anna stood in the snow, tears on her cheeks, watching until Ruth was no more than a shape, then a shadow, then a memory. She had lost her best friend, but not to death, to freedom, and somehow that made it both harder and more beautiful. The last frost came quietly, not with thunder or storm, but with stillness, the kind that leaves dew on the fields instead of ice, and sunlight warm enough to kiss the windowsills. The snow melted slowly, revealing brown earth and broken branches, but also green shoots, small and stubborn, like hope rising after a season of silence. Spring had come, and with it, the reckoning. The Zook family had survived the worst winter of their lives. They had buried no one, but they had lost much. The orchard had been stripped by cold. The chickens had stopped laying. The pantry held only dried herbs and cracked cornmeal. Martha's cough still lingered, and Anna's hands were red from work, her fingertips split and healing. But the fire never died. Neither did they. Jacob stood on the porch the morning the ice broke on the stream. He watched the water run with new life, as though God had finally remembered them. Time to plant, he said, and so they did. Anna pressed seeds into the earth with care, her fingers moving in rhythm. Samuel followed her, humming softly. Martha directed them from a wooden stool, her shawl around her shoulders, voice thin but firm. That week, Anna found another feather at the stump. Long, dark, beautiful. There was no note, no sign, but it felt like Elias had passed through again, quietly, the way he always had, offering signs instead of words. She wrote one final letter and tucked it under the bark. We are still here, still standing. Thank you. I hope the road you walk is kind. 2 weeks later, the bishop came, not with an army or decree but alone. He knocked once. Jacob answered. They stood in silence for a long time. Then Reuben said, I was wrong. Jacob didn't respond. I let fear guide me, the bishop continued. Fear of change, of losing control, of being wrong. Fear can kill a man's soul, Jacob said quietly. We learned that this winter. Reuben nodded. So did I. He stepped forward, holding out something small, a package wrapped in cloth. From the community, he said. Not enough to replace what was lost, but enough to start again. Inside were seeds, nails, dried fruit, and a piece of paper that simply said, We see you. Jacob took the gift not with joy but with grace. By the time the new barn was fully raised, laughter had returned to the Zook home, not constant, not loud, but present like the spring winds that now danced through the open windows. Martha laughed when Samuel gave a sermon to the chickens. Anna laughed when she tripped into the stream and came out with a fish in her boots, and Jacob laughed when he dropped a hammer on his toe, and Martha muttered, God teaches humility however he pleases. They were healing. Slowly but surely. One night, Anna sat beneath the stars, alone, barefoot in the grass. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Ruth, wherever you are, may your sky be this full of stars." She no longer cried when she thought of her friend. Instead, she smiled, the way you smile when something dear has become part of you forever. She looked to the trees beyond the ridge and saw smoke. Just a thin line, just enough. Maybe Elias had returned, maybe not. But either way, she was no longer waiting to be saved. She was living, and that was enough.